Rain poured steadily over the small town of Marigold Bay. The streets were empty, shining under the streetlights that flickered in the storm. Wind pushed against every door and window as if the night wanted to shake the world awake. In the middle of this fierce storm walked a young woman named Lena Harper. Her thin jacket was soaked, her shoes were torn, and her hair clung to her face. She held a small bundle close to her chest. Inside that blanket was a baby only a few months old. The baby cried softly, frightened by the thunder. Lena was hungry, cold, and dizzy, but she held the child tighter to keep it warm. Just hours earlier, she had found the baby behind a grocery store near the trash bins. She had gone there hoping to find thrown-away food. Instead, she found life. Someone had left the baby wrapped in a dirty towel, shaking and crying in the cold air. She did not think twice. She picked the baby up and whispered a promise that she would not walk away. Now the rain fell harder, and every step hurt her. The wind made it almost impossible to see ahead. She looked for lights, any open door, any sign of help. Her breath came out in small clouds. Water ran down her arms and into the baby's blanket. She was afraid the child might get sick. She whispered to the baby again and again, telling it to stay calm, saying that everything would be fine. Deep inside, she was not sure what would happen, but she knew she had to keep moving. Across town, high above the flooded streets, a large mansion stood on the hillside. The lights inside glowed softly through the storm. Inside sat Ethan Cole, a man known by almost everyone in Marigold Bay. He was rich, respected, and powerful. But at that moment, he felt none of it mattered. He sat near a wide fireplace, staring at the flames without really seeing them. On the table beside him lay a picture of a woman holding a small child. His wife and baby had died 3 years before in an accident on a mountain road. Since that day, his house had been quiet, and his heart even quieter. Thunder rolled outside. The world seemed to remind Ethan that life still moved, still shouted, even when he tried not to listen. He looked once more at the picture on the table, feeling pain and emptiness. Then he turned to the window. Lightning flashed, lighting up the valley below. In that brief second, he thought he saw someone moving near his gate. He rubbed his eyes. The storm was wild. Maybe it was only a shadow, but something in him said to check. At the gate, a security guard stood in a raincoat, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. He called on the radio that there was someone outside, maybe hurt. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and umbrella and ran outside with 2 of the guards. The wind hit him hard. Fast rain soaked through his clothes, and the thunder roared in his ears. But when he reached the gate, the sight before him stopped his breath. Lena was lying on the ground, half conscious, covered in mud. In her arms was the baby, pressed to her chest, both shaking. Ethan knelt beside her and took the baby carefully, let out a weak cry. He looked at Lena's face. She was young, but pale and worn from hunger and exhaustion. He shouted for the guards to bring them inside. They carried her carefully through the courtyard and into the house. The warmth of the mansion felt strange after the cold outside. Ethan ordered a blanket for the baby and called for a doctor immediately. Lena's clothes were soaked, her hands cold as ice. When the doctor arrived, he checked both the woman and the child. The baby's body temperature was low but stable. He looked up at Ethan and said that she had probably saved the baby's life by keeping it close. When Lena opened her eyes, she looked frightened. She tried to tell them she needed to leave. She said she did not belong there. Her voice shook, but Ethan told her quietly to rest. He promised that both she and the baby were safe. She looked around at the large room, the clean lamps, the warmth of the fire, and tears filled her eyes. While the doctor finished checking them, Ethan stood by the window again, looking out into the rain. Something heavy and unspoken filled the room. For the first time in years, he felt more than sadness. The sight of that thin girl fighting through the storm to save a stranger's child reached a place in him that had been closed for too long. He did not know her story yet. He only knew that no one who had risked everything to protect another life would leave his home without shelter again. Outside, the storm kept roaring, but inside, a quiet change had begun. A homeless girl had carried a baby through the darkness, and a lonely man had opened his door. Whether by fate or mercy, both of their lives had turned toward something neither had believed in for a long time: hope. Lena woke up in a wide bed that felt too soft to be real. For a long moment she was confused. The ceiling above her was white, not gray like the shelter walls she was used to. Curtains moved gently by the window. Then she remembered the storm, the baby, and the man who had helped her. She sat up fast, afraid she might have lost the baby. At once she heard a small sound. The child was sleeping in a cradle next to the bed, clean, wrapped in a warm blanket, her eyes filled with tears of relief. She reached out and touched the baby's hand. Little fingers closed around her finger, strong, despite all that had happened. A quiet knock came on the door. A woman in a neat uniform stepped inside, holding a tray of food. She smiled kindly and said that Mr. Cole wanted to make sure Lena ate something. Lena thanked her in a soft voice. The smell of bread and warm soup made her stomach hurt from hunger. She ate slowly, embarrassed by how quickly she wanted to finish everything. The woman told her that the doctor had said she and the baby were doing well. The baby had only a mild cold, nothing serious. The woman also said that Mr. Cole would like to speak with her when she felt better. Hours later, when the sun set again behind the hills, Ethan Cole entered the room. He looked different than he had the night before. Without his coat and umbrella, he seemed more human, not just the rich man everyone spoke about in town. Lena stood quickly, unsure what to do. Her eyes dropped to the floor. She told him she was sorry for causing trouble. He told her there was no trouble. He said that she had done something few people could do. She had saved a child in the middle of a storm. He thanked her for that. His voice was calm, but warm. For the first time in a long while, he sounded like a man who meant every word he said. Lena told him how she had found the baby behind the grocery store in the rain. She said she had tried to find a police station, but the storm was too strong. She said she thought maybe someone would take care of the baby better than she could if she could just find help. Her clothes had been soaked, her feet hurt, but she could not leave the baby alone. As she spoke, Ethan watched her closely. Her hands moved nervously, and her voice trembled at certain words. He could see she was not lying. He had once been surrounded by people who told him what they thought he wanted to hear. Lena spoke in a plain, honest way, the way a person speaks who has nothing to hide. Ethan asked if she had somewhere to go. She shook her head. She had been sleeping near the bus station for several weeks. Before that, she had cleaned rooms at a small diner, but the place had closed. She said she would leave once the baby and she were strong enough. Ethan stayed quiet for a moment. The fire made soft noises in the small fireplace. He thought about the little hand that had once gripped his finger when his own baby was alive. He thought about how cold his house had been since then. Finally, he told Lena that she and the baby could stay for a while, at least until they found a safe place. Lena looked up in surprise. She said she could not accept charity. He smiled, a sad but gentle smile, and said it was not charity. It was gratitude. He wanted to thank her by giving her a roof and food. She nodded slowly. Something in his eyes told her he understood pain. That night the house was quiet again, but it felt different. In another room, Ethan sat near the fireplace as he often did. The sound of rain still came from the windows, softer now. He thought about the girl who had arrived from the storm, holding life in her arms. It was strange how someone poor and lost could bring something precious back into a home like his. In her room, Lena could not sleep. She kept thinking about the man who had helped her. She wondered what had made him so kind. When the baby cried, she lifted her and walked slowly around the room to calm her. Looking out the window, she saw the big house garden washed clean by the rain. She told the baby softly that maybe things were changing for them. Ow. In another part of the house, Ethan looked out through his window too. The same moonlight fell over the same wet garden. The first time in years he did not feel completely alone. He did not know why he cared so much about strangers, but he could not ignore the feeling that fate had sent them to him for a reason. The house that had once been silent now held new life. It was as if the storm had washed away more than mud and leaves. It had also washed a little of the sorrow from his heart. Morning light came through the tall windows of the mansion. Birds sang softly outside after many days of rain. Lena sat near the cradle watching the baby sleep. She smiled, still hardly believing that they were warm, safe, and alive. The baby's tiny face looked peaceful. She whispered that the world had not been kind, but maybe it was showing a little mercy now. When she stepped into the hall, she found the woman who had brought her food before. The woman's name was Carla. She said good morning and told Lena that Mr. Cole was in the library if she wanted to talk to him. Her voice was kind, not strict like many people Lena had met while living on the street. Lena walked quietly down the long hall. The house felt grand yet gentle, filled with calm light. Ethan Cole sat at a large table with papers spread before him. He looked up when she entered and smiled slightly. He asked how the baby was. Lena said the baby was healthy this morning and the fever was gone. He nodded with clear relief. He told her that the baby's name could not stay unknown forever. They would have to tell the police what had happened. She agreed at once. She never wanted to hide anything. Later that day, Ethan called an officer he trusted. The officer listened to the whole story and said they would look for the baby's mother. He thanked Lena for her courage. When the officer left, Ethan saw that Lena's hands were shaking again. She told him she was afraid that the world would take the baby away and forget her, as if she never tried to help. Ethan told her she had already done the hardest part. She had cared when everyone else had walked away. The baby stayed in the house while the police searched. Ethan noticed how careful Lena was each moment. She woke early to feed the child and rocked her until she fell asleep. There was something steady in her hands, something gentle. Ethan often found himself standing at the door just watching. One afternoon, he invited Lena to walk in the garden. The air smelled clean after the rain. She looked amazed by the flowers climbing the old stone wall. She said she had never walked in a place so quiet. He asked about her life before the streets. Her face changed as she remembered. She had grown up in a small town with her mother. Her mother worked in a laundry shop until she got sick. Lena tried to care for her but lost the house when bills grew too heavy. After that, she had no family left. She had come to Marigold Bay hoping for a job at a restaurant, but it closed before she could start. Ethan listened without interrupting. He understood what it felt like to lose every piece of the life you loved. She said she had no dreams left except to keep the baby safe until someone good took her in. Ethan walked beside her in silence for a moment, and then said that maybe the universe had other plans. He told her that kindness like hers did not come often, and that the world needed it. She did not know how to answer, so she just gave a small, shy smile. Days became weeks. The police had no news yet about the mother. During that time, the baby started smiling more. Her laugh filled every room. Ethan paid less attention to his business papers. He began coming home early to see the baby and talk to Lena about her day. Sometimes they ate dinner together in the kitchen instead of the large dining room. They laughed at small things, like the way the baby made funny faces when she drank milk. The servants noticed the change in the house. Once the rooms had felt cold and empty, now there was the sound of life. Ethan looked younger. Even his voice carried a lighter tone when he spoke. Lena, too, seemed brighter. She started helping Carla with small tasks, cleaning and cooking, happy to do something in return for staying there. She tried to repay every kindness. One evening, Ethan showed her the old grand piano that had not been played in years. He said his wife used to play it. Lena touched the keys gently, afraid to make a sound. He told her not to be afraid. When she pressed one note, the sound filled the room. Ethan closed his eyes and smiled. For a moment, it was as if the house remembered laughter. That night, when Lena went to check on the baby, she realized she was beginning to feel something deeper for both of them. She had promised herself never to trust anyone too much, but her heart was changing. The mansion no longer felt like a stranger's house. It felt like a place where she belonged. Far across the hall, Ethan sat again by his fire. He realized he was thinking less of what he had lost and more of what he had found. The storm that had once frightened the night now felt like the beginning of another kind of life. Somewhere in the distance, the baby cried softly, and he stood and walked toward the sound, his heart beating with a sense of purpose he thought he would never feel again. The next morning, sunlight poured through wide windows and touched everything with gold. The storm season had ended. Trees looked fresh, and the garden filled with new flowers. In the kitchen, Lena was feeding the baby while humming a song she remembered from her childhood. The baby waved her small hands, trying to follow the rhythm. Carla watched them from the counter and laughed softly. Ethan walked in, dressed simply, not like the businessman people saw in town. He looked happier than anyone had seen him in years. He asked if the baby had eaten well, and Lena nodded proudly. They had decided to name her Hope because, as Ethan said, she had arrived when hope was most needed. The name felt right to both of them. Every day brought quiet routines that felt almost like family. Lena took Hope for walks around the garden. Ethan joined when he could, pushing a small stroller through the stone path. They talked about simple things, like the color of the flowers or the way the ocean shone at noon. Some nights they sat outside with a blanket and looked at the stars while Hope slept. One afternoon, Ethan asked Lena to help him choose colors for a new nursery. He said that even if Hope's real mother returned, he wanted the child to stay in comfort. Together they picked light colors and soft fabrics. Slowly, the cold house that once felt empty began to change. The workers painted the walls, and the room smelled of new beginnings. Lena could see how Ethan's heart was healing. Spoke more about his late wife, not with pain, but with gratitude. Told her how they had once dreamed of adopting a child before the accident that ended everything. Lena listened, and sometimes placed a quiet hand on his arm. She did not need to say much. He seemed to find peace in sharing his memories. Hope's first birthday came, and since no one knew her true birth date, they chose the day they met her. Carla made a small cake. Ethan decorated the table with flowers from the garden. Lena held Hope in her arms while everyone sang. The little girl laughed and smeared frosting on her own face. Ethan smiled more than he had done in years. For a moment, he forgot the world beyond the walls of his home. That night after the small celebration, Ethan and Lena sat near the fire. He thanked her for bringing joy back into his house. He said that she had changed everything. She felt warmth rise in her chest, but did not know how to answer. She simply said that he had given her and Hope a second chance in life. They looked at each other quietly while the fire cracked, and though neither spoke of it, both felt that something deep and unspoken was growing between them. But peace never lasts without testing. The next morning, Ethan received a call from the police. They had found a woman who claimed to be the baby's mother. She had been struggling with addiction and guilt. She said she had left the child because she was afraid she would not survive otherwise. She now wanted to see the baby again. Ethan's heart sank. He did not tell Lena until he knew more. Later that week, the woman arrived with the police officer. She looked fragile and ashamed, her eyes tired and red. Lena stood behind Ethan, holding Hope tightly. The woman burst into tears when she saw the baby healthy and well. She said she had no right to ask for forgiveness, but wanted to tell her story. She explained how fear and hunger had driven her to leave the child behind. Now she was in recovery and wanted a chance to make things right. Lena felt her knees weaken. She looked at Ethan, torn between fear and understanding. Ethan stepped forward and spoke calmly. He said that no one could judge a heart that had been lost, but Hope's safety had to come first. The officer said there would be a court process to decide what was best for the child. For the rest of that day, the house felt heavy. Lena sat by the cradle long after Hope had fallen asleep. Tears filled her eyes as she wondered if this was the end. She thought of the nights when she had carried the child in the storm, and of every morning since then. Ethan found her there and sat beside her. He said they would do everything possible to protect the baby, and that she was not alone. Weeks passed as the hearing approached. Ethan hired the best lawyer he knew. He also helped the baby's mother find proper care, believing no good came from cruelty. Lena visited the garden often, holding Hope close and praying silently. She knew that sometimes love meant letting go, but her heart ached at the thought. Ethan watched from his office window and realized that whatever the future brought, the woman who had once wandered lost in the rain had become the center of his life. She had given him more than hope. She had given him a new reason to believe in goodness. And though fate had opened a new storm ahead of them, he felt stronger than ever, ready to face it by her side. The day of the hearing came with a still gray sky. Lena dressed in the plain clothes Carla had washed for her. She held Hope close while waiting in the small courtroom. Ethan sat beside her, his hand resting near hers on the bench. The baby's mother sat across the room, nervous and pale, her eyes wet before the judge even entered. The sound in the room was small, only the baby's soft breaths and the murmurs of papers turning. The judge asked everyone to speak in turn. The officer explained how Lena had found hope in the storm. He told the court that without Lena's action, the child would not be alive. Then the mother spoke. She said she had been frightened and lost, that she had no home and no clear mind at the time. She had entered a recovery program since then. She thanked Ethan and Lena for saving her baby when she could not. Her voice shook when she said she wanted what was truly best for her daughter. When it was Lena's turn, her hands trembled. She said she'd never planned to be anyone's hero. She said she had only followed her heart that night because she could not walk away. She looked at the judge and said that she loved the baby, but she loved truth more and would accept whatever decision protected the child's future. Her words were plain, yet they filled the room with quiet strength. Ethan's lawyer spoke next. He explained that Ethan and Lena had provided a safe home and proper care. He said Ethan was ready to take legal responsibility for Hope's upbringing if the mother wished for that help. Ethan himself stood and said that even his wealth could not measure what the child had brought into his life. He said that the baby and Lena had reminded him of what love means. He also said he had no wish to take a child from a mother who was ready to cherish her, but he would stand by as a guardian if needed. The room fell still while the judge wrote for several minutes. Finally, he spoke in simple words. He said that the courts could see a hardest truth even without fine clothing or big words. He ruled that Hope's legal custody would stay with Ethan until the mother completed her recovery and showed she could care for her child alone. He added that Lena would remain a caregiver, since her bond with the baby had proven strong and pure. The mother cried again and nodded in agreement. She walked over to Lena and whispered a thank you that came from the deepest part of her heart. She kissed the baby's forehead before leaving the courtroom. Lena held the baby tight, feeling both relief and sadness. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder and said quietly that they would raise Hope together. Weeks passed and life found rhythm again. The house felt lighter each new morning. Hope started to walk, taking small, brave steps between Lena and Ethan. Each time she did, they both laughed and clapped. El Carla said that their laughter had become the sweetest sound the house had ever known. Ethan worked less and spent more time with them. He began a small charity fund for homeless mothers and children in Marigold Bay. He said that one act of mercy had changed his life, and now he wished to pass that mercy forward. People in town spoke kindly of him, not because of his money anymore, but because of his heart. One evening, as the sun went down behind the ocean, Lena stood near the shore with Hope in her arms. The wind moved softly through her hair. Ethan walked beside them, carrying a small basket with food for a simple picnic. They sat together, watching the water glow like gold. Ethan looked at Lena for a long moment and told her that when she came to his door that night, she had saved more than a child. She had saved him from a life without meaning. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled and said that he had saved her too, because now she knew what it meant to truly belong. Hope giggled between them and pulled at their hands until all three were touching. The waves rolled gently against the sand. The house behind them shone with warm lights, no longer a fortress but a home. The storm that once brought them together was far away now, replaced by peace and quiet strength. As dusk turned into night, Ethan lifted Hope high into the air. Her laughter carried over the water. Lena looked up at them and felt her heart steady and safe. She realized that home was not a roof or walls. Home was a feeling born from kindness and shared courage. She reached out and took Ethan's hand. His fingers closed around hers, with the same quiet promise she felt when she first held Hope in the rain. Together, they watched the light fade from the sky, knowing that their world, once broken and cold, had been mended by love and the will to protect it.